What's going on, sports fans? My name is Bryce, also known as Redfish, and you are watching the Off the Dome Sports Podcast. We want to thank you for watching today. Obviously, you clicked on this video ready to listen to our Fantasy Football My Guys episode. Now, these aren't guys who are going to go first or second overall in your draft, but they're guys we are willing to go to bat for, guys who we're willing to die on the hill for. We think they're going to have huge seasons this year and will outperform their ADP or just make that run for a championship. We're also going to be talking about our deep sleepers, guys who you can draft at the very end or even go undrafted, stash them on the bench, and wait for their opportunity to shine. If you love fantasy football like we do, make sure to check out our past episodes where we talked about our top 10s at each position. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe here on YouTube to Off the Dome Sports Podcast, as well as follow us on X at @OffThe_Dome Pod. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the network we partner with, The Know. You can see them there in the bottom left-hand corner. The KNEAUX is the only way to spell it. The Know Network does everything from podcasts to interviews with former and current LSU and Saints figures, as well as written articles that you can check out on the website at theknow.com. Thanks you so much for watching OTD. We appreciate you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Off the Dome Sports Podcast, your favorite sports podcast where two, but sometimes three, sports lovers sit and give their hot takes.
Off the Dome.
I am Redfish.
Lionel Frankenstein here.
And I'm ReBo Hustle.
And after our top 10 fantasy series has concluded with our tight end episode, here we are this week going into our My Guys segment. If you enjoy fantasy football, make sure to check out our last videos. But this one's going to be really fun because we're talking about the guys we are very passionate about this season in fantasy football. Without any further ado, probably the biggest My Guy of My Guys this offseason. We've been talking about fantasy football together since the end of last season because we're co-managers, and I've never met someone who's so passionate about a player who is not being talked about as this guy is right here. So give us your first My Guy, ReBo Hustle.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about him in the running backs episode. Zach Moss of the Cincinnati Bengals. Last season, he was a Colt, looked very good, while Jonathan Taylor missed a lot of time. I believe it was contract-related, but it may have been an injury.
I think it was a little bit of both.
A little bit of both. Yeah, so he looked great, kind of his breakout season, in my opinion. The things that jump off the paper for him are, especially in comparison to Joe Mixon, Zach Moss had 91% of his carries come out of the shotgun formation last season, and Joe Mixon had 75%. And so that tells me that the Bengals do tend to hand the ball off out of the shotgun formation more than they will go under center, which we know well because Joe Burrow is slinging that thing. And so yards per carry out of the shotgun formation, Joe Mixon, 4.2 yards per carry, Zach Moss, 4.4. My point that I'm trying to make overall is Zach Moss and Joe Mixon last season at least were pretty much the same player, and it's going to be an easy way for Zach Moss to fit those shoes and fit into Joe Mixon's role. A lot of people would think that, well, Mixon has the edge in the passing game. That's just not true either. Mixon had one more route run per game last season with 15.8 to Zach Moss's 14.4. Mixon had 0.1 more yard per catch of 7.2 to 7.1. Mixon had one less drop of 3 against 4. They're so similar of a player, and we've finally got a chance to see last season what Zach Moss would look like in an offense where he doesn't have to compete or he isn't a part of a committee. And I think that's why Zach Moss is going to excel this year, and that's why I can't stop drafting him.
I think Zach Moss is a very good player. I think he was in a very good situation last year in Indy with Jonathan Taylor being out, where he was able to shine and not only show what he can do in between the tackles, but what he can do in the passing game. And Cincinnati loves throwing to the running back. We've seen Joe Mixon make his way into a running back one territory for the past 5 to 6 seasons solely off of him getting 60 targets a year. So if Zach Moss can repeat that same production, I don't see a reason why he can't go higher than where he's being drafted. I am a fan of your My Guy.
Yeah, to go with that, 5 out of the 6 past seasons, Joe Mixon has been a top 13 running back. And the one season that was the outlier, he got hurt during 2020.
Yeah, I mean, you lay out a lot of really good points for Zach Moss. I'm not an anti-Zach Moss guy by any means. He's in a good spot where you can take him in the draft and not really risk a whole lot and potentially come away with a starting running back for the year.
Yeah, I just feel like he's in a perfect spot in at least mock draft territory where you can go two running back, two receivers, and then a onesie position, and you're still happy with Zach Moss as your RB2 at least, because there's potential he becomes an RB1 throughout the year.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers you laid out, him versus Joe Mixon, if Joe Mixon can finish running back 13-5 out of the last 6 seasons, even if Zach Moss isn't as good as Joe Mixon, even if he's just one tier down, that puts him at running back 16-17 territory. And if you're getting running back 16 or 17 as your RB2, you're ecstatic. So, yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
I think it's a great pick. And I think the last point to drive home on Zach Moss is he got paid to be the running back 1. They didn't bring him in on a small-time contract, sign him to 2 years, $8 million, and just hope he can come in and do something. They paid him like they want him on the team. So if you're going to invest in a guy in free agency, especially in today's NFL where running backs are not getting paid, if you're paying a running back to come in, you're paying them because you want them on your squad and you can expect them to be a big part of that offense. Moving on to my guy. I already talked about him in the wide receiver episode, but I would be remiss if I didn't claim him as a my guy because of how strong I've been standing on him all offseason. I try to get him in every mock draft that I do, and that's DK Metcalf. You can see him there with his bright green hair. I am a big fan of what DK Metcalf can do this season. So just a little bit of background on DK Metcalf. He will be going into his 6th season. 3 of his seasons he's finished wide receiver 15 or higher. This past season was his lowest season since his rookie year, where he finished at wide receiver 21, and right now he's being drafted at wide receiver 23. So the first thing for me is he's being drafted at his absolute floor. I don't think you see a season where DK Metcalf drops below a wide receiver 2 territory in a 12-team league, and the league that I pay most attention to is a 14-team league. So if he's going wide receiver 21, wide receiver 23, he's a steady wide receiver 2. But I think he has potential to be way more than that, and here's why. So first of all, last season to me was kind of an outlier for DK Metcalf. It was his worst year by far. It was the first time he missed a game in a couple seasons, and not only that, but in 4 other contests, he played in 75% or less snaps because he was dealing with the injury that ultimately caused him to miss a game. So he played through 4 games injured as well as missing a game. You're not going to get the same DK Metcalf if he's hurt because of what his game is as far as being a deep threat, yards after catch, just explosive, big-time play guy. But not only that, he's a huge red zone threat. He's not only big plays, he is the number 1 targeted wide receiver in the red zone in all of the NFL. And that has translated to him having 1 double-digit touchdown season, but all of his seasons, 6 or more touchdowns. So he's going to catch touchdowns. The new OC coming in. We're moving on from Shane Waldron in Seattle. He goes over to Chicago, and in comes Ryan Grubb, OC from the University of Washington. If you did not watch Washington last year, they took college football by storm with their high-powered 11 personnel offense. And the best wide receiver on that Washington team, Rome Odunze. Rome Odunze was a dominant X-receiver on that team. He finished 3rd in Biletnikoff Award rankings and was arguably up there with Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison as the best wide receiver in college football. Not only that, but he was a top 10 draft pick. If you asked me today, going back, if you put DK Metcalf up against Rome Odunze, I would say they're similarly talented. I wouldn't say either one stands head and shoulders above the other. So if DK Metcalf can come into that role and fill what Rome Odunze, of course, NFL defenses are going to be different than what Rome Odunze faced in college. But DK Metcalf, top 10 against zone defenses, top 5 against man defenses. We saw what he did to the Dallas Cowboys last season. Dallas Cowboys had the number 1 man defense in all of the NFL, and he had 3 touchdowns against them last season. I think DK is a dominant player, and he's being drafted at his absolute floor. Again, being drafted at wide receiver 23, kind of going at the 4 or 5 turn. And I'm bold on DK. I would take him in the 3rd. I really like DK Metcalf this season, not only because of what he can do, but everything that's around him with a new offense. That whole Seattle offense took a step back last season. They made changes. They're going to be better. And he is the absolute alpha in that wide receiver room. DK, top 15 wide receiver. Book it.
Yeah. Is there any concern for you about JSN stepping into a larger role in year 2?
No.
I know year 1 wasn't all that flashy. It wasn't really anything to break the bank. But does any concern from JSN in year 2?
JSN's going to be better in year 2 than he was in year 1. And the thing about JSN is he wasn't bad last year. Like, if you played him on some weeks, he was a good flex. And I think he was better in the actual game of football than he was for fantasy. But if you look at that Washington offense, you know all three guys who got drafted. You know JSN, you know Tyler Lockett, you know DK Metcalf for Seattle. Well, you know Rome Odunze, you know Jalen McMillan, you know Jalen Polk for Washington. And I think JSN is going to fill that Jalen McMillan role, who I know you're high on, right?
Oh, yeah.
High on for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And not only that, but Rome Odunze was obviously the number one on that Washington team. And I think DK's obviously the number one in Seattle. Like, I think it's hard to compare, apples to oranges with college to NFL. But for me, I think it actually compares really well. And DK's absolutely the number one in that wide receiver room, and I wouldn't look at Tyler Lockett or JSN taking anything away from him because I think they can coexist.
Yeah, I think JSN taking a step forward this year is more of a threat to Tyler Lockett than it is DK Metcalf, just because it's more of shorter intermediate routes that JSN is a specialist in, and DK Metcalf's a long ball, jump ball kind of guy. And I think that'll affect Tyler Lockett fantasy-wise. But, I mean, like you're saying, in that offense, in this high-powered, super wide receiver offense, in my opinion, like, I don't think that they can't coexist or anything like that. It's just it'll be taking away a couple touches more from Tyler Lockett than he did last year.
And then my last point on DK is every single season he's had over 110 targets. If you're telling me I'm getting a guy who's getting 110 targets in a pass-happy offense with a top 5 in accuracy quarterback, Geno Smith, even though he took a step back, still top 5 in accuracy over the last 2 seasons. I like where this is going, and I think everything's adding up for DK to have a breakout year, even though he's been one of the most consistent guys over the past 5 seasons.
Yeah, like we talked about last week with the tight ends, we were talking about how much of a value Travis Kelce is this year compared to the previous. DK Metcalf was kind of like the 18th player off the board in the last 2 years, just because of he's an athletic freak, and everybody was just betting on upside, and it feels like this year they're finally not betting on him. And so you could tell me you can get this athletic freak in the 3rd or 4th round of any draft. That's a steal in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, he's going after Malik Neighbors, Jalen Waddle, DJ Moore, Mike Evans, Stephon Diggs. I'm taking DK over most, if not all, of those guys.
Yeah, I still don't understand all this Stephon Diggs love. Like, he'll have a solid season, but it's nothing worth his ADP, nowhere near it, in my opinion. But yeah, if you guys don't have anything else on DK, we'll move on to Mr. James Cook of the Buffalo Bills. Yeah, so with the Buffalo offense, there are 317 vacated targets available in that offense now with the departure of Stephon Diggs. Glad we brought him up there.
Yeah.
And Gabe Davis. That makes it second most in the league. So those targets are going to have to go somewhere. And they added Keon Coleman through the draft. They add Curtis Samuel through free agency. But can we really trust Curtis Samuel and a rookie receiver to really be the target dominators in that offense? Also, you have Dalton Kincaid, of course. But I think James Cook is in a prime position to receive a lot of those vacated targets. There's been research done since 2019 where teams that have massive amounts of vacated targets, they tend to focus those vacated targets to the running back room. And there is no one in the running back room for Buffalo other than James Cook that is competent enough to get it done through the air. You also want to look at the vacated air yards. The Bills have 3,353 vacated air yards, the most in the league.
Excuse me.
So somebody's got to get out there and catch some passes from a possible QB or the QB1 in fantasy football with Josh Allen. Then you want to look at the vacated targets inside the 10, because a lot of the conversation surrounding James Cook and the negative connotation around him, or the idea, is the lack of red zone opportunities. That's very obvious. If you look at his stats from last year, he had 2 rushing touchdowns. It sounds so weird that I'm going to bat and willing to die on a hill for a guy who had 2 rushing touchdowns at the running back position. But that's just not all that he does. He's shown his explosiveness through the air. But, looking into the inside the 10, you're going to have Josh Allen, who will take goal line snaps. He will get rushing touchdowns when they get inside the 10. Adding Ray Davis to that offense, that there's going to be slightly less opportunities possibly for James Cook again when it comes to goal line carries. He had to deal with Latavius Murray and Damian Harris last season. They took a bulk of those. However, there are 13 vacated targets inside the 10. That's not a crazy number, but it's the third highest percentage in the league. So some of those vacated targets, they're going to go to James Cook. Maybe they draw up some kind of Texas route, give him a little wheel, something to get into the end zone in a more creative fashion. And I think the perfect person to kind of put that together is the new offensive coordinator, Joe Brady. When he took over after Week 10 last year, that's when James Cook's season really, really took off. You see an uptick in opportunities both on the ground and through the air. We'll look at before Joe Brady took over, Cook averaged 2.8 targets a game. After Joe Brady took over as the interim OC, it jumped up to 3.7. So it's not a massive leap, but he's getting an additional target per game. He finished as the RB12 last season. So I think you get the increase in opportunities as he showed through the back half of last season. I think we're looking at a James Cook. I think we see James Cook further inside the top 12, cementing himself as a higher end RB1.
Yeah, guaranteeing a top 12 running back is pretty good. I mean, he's not a guy that I've been drafting a lot just because he hasn't fallen to me, but when I see him, I draft him. I just don't know how much of the vacated air yards are going to technically go to the running back, but I still have a lot of faith in James Cook to finish inside the top 10.
Yeah, I mean, I think James Cook's a really good player. He's just as talented as his brother was when his brother was at his peak. You look at Joe Brady, who obviously we're huge fans of as LSU fans, and what he did with Clyde Edwards-Helaire when he was here in college, and Joe Brady runs a similar offense now in the NFL that he did in college, and he made Clyde a first-round pick. I'm not saying Clyde isn't talented. I'm not saying Clyde's a bad player, but Clyde wasn't a first-round pick if Joe Brady doesn't implement him the way he did, and James Cook is a more talented player than Clyde, in my opinion. So if you can replicate that same offense and figure out how to incorporate James Cook in a more play-by-play fashion, there's no reason he can't score more than the 6 touchdowns he scored last season. There's no reason he can't get more targets a game, like you were mentioning, after Week 10. And he's still super explosive and has game-breaking speed. So I think James Cook can be a really, really good option in fantasy football.
Yeah, currently he's being drafted as the RB14 in PPR formats, which I think is way undervalued for him, especially considering a PPR format. I mean, I went on and on about the target potential for James Cook in this offense, and I think considering that in a full-point PPR, James Cook could be a game breaker.
Yeah, I mean, as a receiving back, James Cook has a higher upside than guys going above him like Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, Isaiah Pacheco, who don't necessarily catch the ball as much. And if I'm faced with James Cook versus those 3 guys, 8 times out of 10, I'm taking James Cook no matter what. So, yeah, good. So far, all 3 my guys, I'm confident in all 3 of them. I'm proud of us, boys. Proud of us as a unit.
Yeah, I can't wait to disappoint.
Yeah, because here it comes.
So moving on to a team that I believe will be the winners of the AFC East.
Whoa. I feel we need to pause there for a second.
No.
What?
We're going to talk about that in our
We die on
NFL
this
hot
hill.
We're going to talk about that in our NFL hot takes episode.
We die on this hill.
But
That's
also,
going to be interesting.
Also, we lived up to the intro. Hot takes off the dome. Thank you, ReBo Hustle, for giving us the first of the episode.
So that would be your New York Jets.
Not my Jets. Jesus, not my Jets.
So incredible they almost killed him.
All right, talk about Mike Williams.
So the Jets added Mike Williams this offseason, a guy that kind of has just been making his name as a jump ball, vertical threat kind of guy across from a guy we're going to talk about later in Keenan Allen. With the Chargers, my thing with Mike Williams is I'm not taking him as a my guy because I think that he's going to start for me this year. I like his upside as a backup just because I have the most amount of faith in this Jets defense. So that means there will probably be more attempts within, like on the Jets scoring side of the field. And if Mike Williams can come back within the first 3 or 4 weeks, I really think that he can be their premier touchdown scorer inside the red zone. And that's just because you have guys like Allen Lazard who kind of just stretch the field, not necessarily a jump ball guy, and one of the game's best route runners, in my opinion, in Garrett Wilson. And so it's just a stark contrast between Mike Williams and Garrett Wilson. Also, a healthy Aaron Rodgers. Last time we saw him healthy, believe he won league MVP.
Yeah, I mean, he won back-to-back 3 years ago.
Yeah, and so I just feel like you give him a weapon like Mike Williams and at least the touchdown upside as a bye-week starter, or maybe even if he keeps it up throughout the year as a flex position. Mike Williams is just a guy that I have a lot of faith in because of that touchdown upside.
Yeah, no, I like the points you brought up, because I also don't want to be relying on Mike Williams to be, you know, one of my top receivers on my fantasy team. But
Yeah,
having him on the roster where, oh man, one of my top tier guys is down, or one of my guys is on bye week. Let me throw in this guy that can go get 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of different to have a my guy that's not a surefire starter, but I like his versatility, and we haven't talked about him at all in these breakdowns of fantasy football, and I feel like he deserves it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think his biggest question mark is injury. I mean, he got hurt last year. We don't know what he's going to do. He's on a new team for the first time in his career. How's that going to translate? But I think the great part about where he ended up is if Aaron Rodgers is healthy, he's with a really good quarterback. He's playing across from a really good receiver in Garrett Wilson, so it's not all attention on Mike Williams. And they're so different that it'll be great for them. Because Garrett Wilson does his best work close to the line of scrimmage, great route runner, whereas Mike Williams is that deep threat, vertical stretch kind of guy. So it's all kind of working in Mike Williams' favor, and I think the best part about it is he doesn't have a ton of pressure on him. There's not this huge expectation for Mike Williams to come in and get 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns. We're just going to see what we get with Mike Williams, and that's the best. I mean, for him, that's the best place you want to be, is not having a bunch of weight on your shoulders and high expectations where you can prove a bunch of people wrong. So I wouldn't say as far as like every draft I'm searching out Mike Williams, but if he falls to me and I like where he's at, absolutely I'm putting him on my team.
It's just the potential of Mike Williams to be great in those short starts that you will play him at. I think that's an upside compared to like if you're drafting DeAndre Hopkins, who is just going to get you about 8 points a week, and that's about it. Yeah. He's not going to boom or bust many times. He's just going to get you 8 points.
Moving on to my second my guy, the only rookie on the list, Jonathan Brooks. I am known as the running back guy when it comes to our friend group. When it comes to the NFL draft, I do most of my work just looking at running backs because it's my favorite position in football. I think it's the most versatile position in football, and it's also a very undervalued position. So I just really like it, and I like to study them. And Jonathan Brooks is a guy who there's no doubt was the best running back in this class. He wasn't my favorite running back. I really like Trey Benson, but I think he's definitely the most talented and had the most production. Only running back in this draft picked in the first 2 rounds. Drafted number 46 overall to the Carolina Panthers. And of course, you have to cover the bad before we get to the good. So here's the downside of Jonathan Brooks. Coming off a torn ACL. Obviously, you don't love to hear that. Good part about that is most news coming out of rookie camp is that he'll be healthy to suit up week 1. Good. Great. He's a rookie. Even if he was healthy, you don't expect a rookie to come in week 1 and get 85% of the snaps at running back. So I think it's a great situation for him where he can ease himself in. And that being said, the competition above him isn't like there's a star on the team. Chuba Hubbard, good player. He's a fine NFL running back, but he's not somebody who can't be usurped. Miles Sanders, we saw last season because ReBo Hustle and I drafted him expecting him to be the running back 1 in Carolina. He was cut halfway through the year off of our fantasy team, and I wouldn't be surprised if he gets cut in real life too. Miles Sanders, pretty much out of the tank in Carolina. So you're competing with Chuba Hubbard for snaps, and if you're competing with Chuba Hubbard as a second-round running back who's only 20 years old at the moment, it's looking pretty good for you. So now that we have kind of the bad out the way, let's talk about the good of Jonathan Brooks. Like I said, highest drafted running back in this draft, only one drafted in the first 2 rounds. Played for a college football playoff team in Texas where he was averaging over 6 yards per carry, had 25 receptions on the year, had 10 total touchdowns in the season, and he's like the prototypical running back when it comes to size, speed, strength. He's got 4.5 speed. He's 6 foot, 210, and can run in between the tackles. That's what you want from your running back. He's not the best receiver out of the backfield. Like, he's not an Alvin Kamara. He's not a Christian McCaffrey. But like we talked about earlier with Zach Moss, Joe Mixon level running back. Gets 50 targets a year, gets his receptions out the backfield, and makes it work in the PPR format. So specifically in PPR, that's a good look for Jonathan Brooks. Like I said, not much competition above him. And then the Carolina Panthers themselves invested heavily into the offensive line over the offseason. Brought in, I know Robert Hunt as their new guard, and if you're heavy in the run game like their new head coach Dave Canales is, you want a good offensive line. And they did that. They brought in Dave Canales as the head coach. And let me ask you all a question. Dave Canales as the head coach. Do y'all remember what Rachaad White did last year?
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like RB11 after being irrelevant.
Yeah, and then second question, would you, on a talent basis, take Jonathan Brooks over Rachaad White?
All day, every day, twice on Sundays.
Yeah, I thought so too. And that's not putting any bad word on Rachaad White. He was in contention for our mind, guys. I know ReBo and I are really high on Rachaad White.
I was so surprised that neither one of you selected him.
He's an honorable mention in Rachaad White because I like him. But the things that Jonathan Brooks did in college football, they're going to translate to the NFL because he is so versatile at the running back position. I think he's the definition of a 3-down back. If you ask me who Jonathan Brooks looks like on the NFL level, I would say Saquon Barkley. If you're telling me I can get Saquon Barkley in the 8th round, who's young and is not going to have to rush out from the beginning, don't draft Jonathan Brooks expecting him to be your running back 2 in week 2. That's not the pace of what Jonathan Brooks is going to do. But right now, he's going in the 8th round of drafts. His ADP is somewhere in the 30s at the running back position. I think Jonathan Brooks has all the talent in the world. He has the opportunity with a run-heavy offense and a run-heavy head coach. And he's got an offensive line who's making strides to become better. Last point about Jonathan Brooks before I ship it on over to Lionel for his last my guy. Every season for the past 8 years, at least one rookie running back has finished in the top 24. Look at all the rookie running backs this season. Tell me who has the best chance of finishing in the top 24. I promise you, it's the guy in Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, my thing against Jonathan Brooks is I think that it's going to take him a couple weeks. And so that's why I was giving you Tony Pollard over him, Austin Eckler over him. And so I feel like at the end of the year, Jonathan Brooks is going to be electric. I just am not so certain that I would be okay with him as a starter where if I had to be in, like, it just depends on what the draft looks like.
Yeah.
If I got in a situation where I needed a starter, I'd probably pick Tony Pollard. But if I'm just drafting off of potential, I'm taking Jonathan Brooks as a backup just because he'll probably break my starting lineup by the end of the year.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, roster construction I think is the most important part when it comes to drafting Jonathan Brooks, because if you can get one of our elite guys at running back, maybe in your first round at top of the second, then you can almost punt on their position for a little bit, load up on your wide receivers, maybe take another established running back before you get to the 8th round, and can take Jonathan Brooks where he can sit down on the bench for 4 weeks, 5 weeks, however long it takes him to get really into the groove, into the NFL system, and figure out how it goes. And then from there, I'm fully on board the Jonathan Brooks train. I think he will have an incredible rookie season once he gets rolling.
Yeah, like I said, Jonathan Brooks, don't expect him to be your running back 2 in week 2. But when you roll around to week 13, week 14, and you're making a push for the playoffs and it's time to put up or shut up, I want Jonathan Brooks in my lineup all day, every day by the time it gets there based on what I'm seeing right now.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Let's go from the young gun to the old man himself, Keenan Allen. So let's read off some statistics about Mr. Keenan Allen. Obviously finished last year with a career year, leading the league with 11.5 targets per game.
That's insane. I didn't know that.
It's ridiculous. 11.5 targets per game. That's not replicable. He's not going to do it again. However, I do believe his position in the Chicago offense is going to be a target sponge. I don't think he's going to reach the nearly 12 targets a game that he was reaching last season, but I still think for where he's going in drafts, which we'll get to because it's crazy value in my opinion, where he's going in drafts, you can get incredible value for Keenan Allen. Let's talk about rookie quarterbacks, because that's the, in my opinion, number one knock on Keenan Allen and maybe the rest of the Chicago Bears offense this season, because rookie quarterbacks are sometimes hard to trust. So obviously we reference the fantasy footballers a ton on this show. We're all big fans. And they did some research this summer talking about rookie quarterbacks since 2010. and they look at quarterbacks drafted inside the top 10 of the first round since that year. 3 of 30 receivers who played with rookie quarterbacks drafted number 1 overall reached at least 100 receptions in that quarterback's rookie season. That would be Reggie Wayne with Andrew Luck. Adam Thielen did it last year with Bryce Young. And then Keenan Allen did it with Justin Herbert when he destroyed the league in his rookie year for Justin Herbert. 7 of those 30 receivers eclipsed 1,000 yards. Keenan Allen again. So he has a reputation of helping the rookie quarterback. They can really rely on a safety blanket receiver like Keenan Allen. Another quick stat, there were 3 rookie quarterbacks since that time. 4 rookie quarterbacks since that time that have hit 24 or more touchdowns. That is currently where Caleb Williams' line is set at 23.5. So if you really believe in Caleb Williams, 4 quarterbacks have done that. That'd be Russell Wilson, Baker Mayfield, Danny Dimes. I know you guys are not in on Daniel Jones, but his name comes up regardless, and Justin Herbert. So Keenan Allen has been in this situation before where I feel like his game in the NFL does not age. It's very similar to a Larry Fitzgerald, late career Larry Fitzgerald, where he doesn't need to break the game with speed. He doesn't need to out-physical the guy across from him. He's just going to find the open spaces and make the offense easier for the rookie quarterback. And that's where I think getting Keenan Allen as the wide receiver 33 in a PPR format is a really good deal.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many times you can get wide receiver 33 as Keenan Allen. I mean, at least I find he goes higher. I mean, I know that's what I'm sure Sleeper has him at or whatever. But my thing against Keenan Allen is those guys that do break that mold are like in the height of their career. Keenan Allen did it right at the tail end of the height of his career with Justin Herbert. And I forget who did it with Andrew Luck, but he was at the top of his game at that time too.
Reggie Wayne.
It just escaped my mind. There's great Colts wide receivers, okay?
They have had some good ones.
But I'm just worried that there's 2 wide receiver, well, technically 3 wide receiver 1s in that room now because Rome Odunze doesn't know how to be a wide receiver 2. He's coming off of being a wide receiver 1 in Washington. Keenan Allen was the 1 for the Chargers, and DJ Moore was the 1 for the Bears last year. I mean, I know that eventually the hierarchy will change and figure itself out. It's just why I'm kind of avoiding Bears receivers in general is because, one, you have to have faith that there's going to be this statistical outlier at quarterback as well as you pick the right receiver. But by all means, you just gave me Keenan Allen. I have to have faith in Keenan Allen in our Dynasty League, and I'm hoping that he is the correct answer as well.
When it comes to the Bears receivers, Rome Odunze is the long-term option. I see his game very similarly to Keenan Allen, where in 2024, I think Keenan Allen's still going to get all those opportunities, at least the vast majority of them. DJ Moore is going to be, he might be wide receiver 1, but I view him in a similar vein to Mike Williams when he was with the Chargers with Keenan Allen, where DJ Moore is going to be the big play guy. Keenan Allen is going to rack up receptions because that's what he does always.
Yeah, I mean, at wide receiver 33, I'm not in or out on Keenan Allen, like in the grand scheme of things, but at wide receiver 33, I think that's a great bet. Just because he's the guarantees that you're talking about. Keenan Allen is going to get his targets, he's going to get his receptions, and he's going to get touchdowns. It's what Keenan Allen does. I think, although he is aging and he's in a very questionable situation, which there's no looking past that rookie quarterback, 2 other receivers on the team who could, play high levels of football. I don't think there's a lot of certainty around the Bears this season, but there is certainty around Keenan Allen, and that's that he's going to contribute to your fantasy team. He wouldn't be a personal my guy, but I could see the path for him still being a top 20 option in fantasy football this season.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so one more quick thing on Keenan Allen. I also view it a lot similarly to Mike Evans last season. Mike Evans was incredibly discounted in fantasy drafts last year because of a questionable quarterback situation with Baker Mayfield there in Tampa. You got a questionable quarterback situation. Do you really trust a rookie quarterback in Caleb Williams? And, I mean, Mike Evans last year proved the doubters wrong. I believe he finished inside the top 10.
Yeah, I think he was like wide receiver 8 or 9.
Sounds about right. Well, yeah, Keenan Allen was wide receiver 8, so we'll say wide receiver 9.
All right,
so
there we go.
So they finished the same, around the same last year. I don't see any reason why Keenan Allen can't get close to the production he had last year.
Yeah, I mean, it's just back to the other weapons in the offense in that comparison, too. I mean, I don't think we're ever going to agree with Keenan Allen here, at least as in a redraft league. And I just kind of don't want to touch any bear.
Yeah, and, we got to take what ReBo says with a grain of salt because he's the only one here with a Keenan Allen jersey. So,
I mean, you go in the forest, I don't think you want to touch a bear anyway. So,
true, true. Yeah, I think we're all, steadfast on our guys this year, on our my guys, and I think we all bring up valid points, bring in statistics to back it up. That's what we do, analytical minds over here at Off the Dome. That's wrapped it up for our my guys. However, stay tuned because we're going to take a little break, and when we're back, we're going to go into our deep sleepers, guys who are being drafted in late rounds who we think may shoot up draft boards and way overperform their ADP this season. Stay tuned for our breakout candidates. Thanks for checking out our My Guys, and thanks for staying tuned through this break. So here we are, deep sleepers from the OTD crew, guys who are going in the double-digit rounds, some of them even undrafted, as we'll see with ReBo Hustle's pick, that we think are going to outperform their ADP, guys we think can make a really big impact not only on the NFL field but in fantasy football for you this season. So I'll go ahead and start us off in my guy, Marshawn Lloyd, another rookie running back. I had Jonathan Brooks as my guy, and this was kind of my third option for my guy, so I'm going to use him as my deep sleeper because that's really what he is right now. His ADP has him going kind of near the 11-12 turn. And in most leagues, that's kind of getting to the point where you want to get a kicker and a defense. So you're getting this guy really late in your draft, and you're getting him as running back 4 in most cases, or even your last round, take a shot on a guy with upside, and that's exactly what Marshawn Lloyd is to me. So Marshawn Lloyd, running back out of USC. My favorite fact about Marshawn Lloyd was he was Daniel Jeremiah's running back 1 on his draft board, and I take DJ's word very seriously as somebody who listens to Move the Sticks and somebody who thinks DJ is consistently one of the best draft analysts we have. So if he trusts him, I trust him. Of course, that's not all I have to say about Marshawn Lloyd, but that's my first point. Second point, Josh Jacobs. I'm not a believer in Josh Jacobs in a Packers uniform. When he first signed his contract, it looked like it was a 4-year contract. He was getting his money. Packers believe in him. The more you break it down, the more you realize it's basically a 2-year guarantee. And not only that, but they signed him before the draft, and they still put draft capital into Marshawn Lloyd. Like we talked about with the running back market, for you to put draft capital or free agency money into a running back means you believe in that guy. You don't just draft the running back just for fun. You're really looking at the player and if they can succeed, and the Packers believe in Marshawn Lloyd by putting that draft capital in him. I also think A.J. Dillon's pretty much a non-factor in the Packers offense. Aaron Jones left, went to Minnesota. A.J. Dillon really has just seen his career go downhill over the past 2 seasons, and I don't think he is really the answer in the Packers backfield with Josh Jacobs and Marshawn Lloyd. Lloyd is going to a team in the Packers who highly implement a 2-back system. We haven't seen a Packers offense with Matt LaFleur that hasn't had 2 backs contributing at any given time. And I think that Marshawn Lloyd better fills the Aaron Jones role than Josh Jacobs does. Josh Jacobs doesn't have the speed that Marshawn Lloyd has, doesn't have the receiving upside that Marshawn Lloyd has. Marshawn Lloyd is 5'10", 205. He's got the size that you want. And everything coming out of camp about Marshawn Lloyd is he's explosive and he's got speed, which is the 2 opposite things you'd say of Josh Jacobs. I'm not, trying to sit here and just crap on Josh Jacobs the entire time, but I really like Marshawn as a player, and I think he's in a great system that's really going to help him out. And not only that, he's going at the 11-12 turn. He's running back 52 in drafts right now. If you're telling me I can get a guy who draft capital was put in this season, who is looking to be a running back 2 on a high-scoring offense, who implements a 2 running back system, and he's going all the way in the 11th round, I really like that. And not only that, in college, played with Caleb Williams, played on a Cliff Kingsbury offense who does not very much implement the run, and yet he finished 7th in all of FBS in yards per carry with 7.3. And I think similar to Jonathan Brooks, like I talked about earlier, he has the potential to be one of those late season league winners, where he's really gonna just give you a boost of energy at the flex or even running back 2 position. Jonathan Jacobs, who's that? Josh Jacobs is not known to be the most healthy guy, and he's not known to be the most efficient guy. Last season, he finished, at a decent spot with the Raiders, but that wasn't on efficiency. That was on volume. He also battled a couple injuries here and there. If Josh Jacobs goes down, Marshawn Lloyd is injected as the number 1 running back on a team that's projected to be a top 5 offense in the NFL. I really like the situation he is in. I like what they did with him. I like everything about Marshawn Lloyd this season. And if you're in a dynasty league, it's even better looking at the situation that Marshawn Lloyd's going to be in, considering what the Packers think about him in the building and what they've shown us in practice. I'm all in on Marshawn Lloyd. I want him on all of my teams. Give me number 32 for the Packers.
Yeah, I've learned over the years that if Bryce is this emphatic about a running back, then you should probably have him on every team that you've put together for fantasy wise. Bryce rarely misses on running backs, so I'm also all in on Marshawn Lloyd.
Yeah, with Marshawn Lloyd, it's all dependent on how much does Green Bay trust Josh Jacobs. Do they change their scheme to fit more of a 1 running back style like Josh Jacobs has been in the past? But we know Green Bay's history. They've always had 2 running backs, and one of them being a premier pass catcher. and Aaron Jones is gone. Josh Jacobs, not a premier pass catcher, like you said. Marshawn Lloyd has that potential, has that explosion, can do pretty much anything that Aaron Jones has done in the past. And, yeah, I mean, all three of these guys are guys that you are taking a flyer on, basically. A guy that you don't want to wait till free agent, like till the end of the draft to pick up and replace an IR spot or something like that. These are all guys that you have faith in, that you think that can break your lineup by the end of the year. But moving on to my guy, my deep sleeper, Jonnu Smith, a guy that...
The deepest of sleepers, some would say.
A guy that goes undrafted more often than not. I personally, he jumps off the page for me because of his size, his speed, and the fit in Miami for him. A team that loves to run it up and down the field. Everybody's on go routes half the time, or at least cutting across the middle, has potential to have breakout runs. And Jonnu Smith's kind of that as a tight end, kind of the only guy I think of when I think of deep threat tight end that's like a true deep threat. He's going into year 7 at age 28. A guy that kind of outperformed Kyle Pitts last year, at least from the eye standpoint. Statistically, he outperformed him 7 out of the 16 games that both of them played together. And that's huge, being everybody is buying in on Kyle Pitts. Even we did. I believe we had him as tight end 5 or 6. And that's because of the upgrade in offense with Kirk Cousins coming in and them having a new scheme. Jonnu Smith also going to a high-powered offense, an upgrade in offense is what I would say, and a great scheme fit for him. And so I think that the cards are just stacking in his favor just because he's coming off one of his best seasons to date, and he's not much of a risk in a draft because you don't have to put pretty much any capital into him.
I mean, I like your point about, you can basically pick him up off of waivers after a draft, and you can use your last-round pick on him if you feel confident. And you're right in the sense that this is a system that actually makes sense for Jonnu Smith because he's such a unique player at the tight end position. You remember back in New England when it was Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. And Hunter Henry was the red zone threat and the blocker, where Jonnu Smith was that close to the line of scrimmage, kind of play the H-back role as a tight end. And I think he can do that in the Miami offense where all of the attention is going to go on Mostert and Achane and Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. The fact that he's going to be the 5th or 6th option on a team makes it better for Jonnu Smith. My only question is can a tight end in Miami actually succeed? We haven't seen it yet. But the flip side of that coin is you've seen Durham Smythe. So it really just depends. He's a huge question mark. Jonnu Smith could finish the season as a top 15 tight end, or he could finish the season where he's being drafted, and that's nowhere. So we just don't know what Jonnu Smith is, but I like that you're standing on his podium.
Yeah, I mean, the conversation, at least it sounds like coming from you about Jonnu Smith, is a lot of the same ideas that I kind of kept in mind with my deep sleeper of Xavier Legette, where I want to get ahead of the curve, where I think by week 1, there's going to be, after the final game concludes on week 1 and we go into the week 2 waivers, there could be a mad rush to pick up either of those guys. They could, week 1, Jonnu Smith pops off for a touchdown and 80 yards or whatever, and people are like, wow, this guy that was not on anyone's board except for ReBo's, is incredibly valuable, or could be incredibly valuable. I mean, we saw last season with guys like Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams get picked up at the end of, off waivers after week 1, where people were dropping, 60, 70% of their free agent budget on picking up those guys because they saw the potential after a week 1 performance. My biggest thing with Xavier Legette, aside from getting ahead of everyone on waivers, is the potential of the offense. Bryce Young did not look like everyone expected him to, at least all those that secured him as, number 1 can't miss prospect.
He looked exactly how I expected him to.
That's why I said those who thought he was, the chosen one. Because I also was not a Bryce Young guy. But I think going into year 2 with an upgraded offense, it could be. I'm not saying that Bryce Young is going to break fantasy football. I don't think that's really in his range of outcomes at all. But I do think adding Deontay Johnson and upgrading the offensive line, adding another weapon for him in Xavier Legette. And then I think the biggest piece of all of this is going to be Dave Canales. So he's, figured out the quarterback position, it seems. He helped Geno over in Seattle. He helped Baker last year in Tampa. Now over there as the head coach with the Carolina Panthers, I think he could maybe unlock something in Bryce Young that wasn't there last year. And that puts Xavier Legette in a prime position to really step in as, I think, the alpha in that offense. Because they still have Adam Thielen, or the ghost of Adam Thielen, still hanging on by a thread in the league. And then I don't have faith in Deontay Johnson to be an alpha in that offense. He had his opportunity in Pittsburgh, and, he got traded away this offseason. So you want to look at who has a chance. I think it's Xavier Legette, who is an athletic freak. Similar athletic profile to someone like DK Metcalf. maybe a little bit like DK light, so maybe like a Deebo Samuel kind of guy.
I wouldn't even give him light. Like, that was the biggest draft comparison for me, like, going into this draft was DK and Xavier Leggett being these giant freaks of nature that will blow by you.
Yeah, so I mean, having an athletic monster in Xavier Leggett, you have a really good chance at hitting some of that upside. There's concerns. Can Bryce Young really step into his own in year 2? And I think by the time midseason rolls around, Xavier Leggett could be a potential league winner. From if you're getting him at the end of your draft, and you can, if it doesn't work out, you cut him by week 5 or whatever. But later on in the season, I really believe Xavier Leggett could be the guy.
Yeah, I mean, I hate that we're Saints fans and we're sitting here talking about how good the Panthers could be, because they got a guy from the Buccaneers, and then like it's all backwards. But I like Xavier Leggett. Obviously, I like DK Metcalf, so I don't have much of a choice but to like Leggett because, like you guys said, they're pretty similar as far as athletic profile goes. My only question with Leggett was, why didn't he produce his first 4 years in college? It really took him till his 5th year to do anything at South Carolina. Yet the Panthers believed in him. They took him, and if anybody's going to help Bryce Young figure it out, I think Dave Canales is a good guy to do it, and I think that Panthers offense could take a huge step forward, and Leggett could benefit very heavily from the new changes. Honorable mentions for deep sleepers. I want to talk about Jerome Ford real quick. He was a guy who I originally had as my guy, but was talked out of it just because there are more question marks around him, and honestly, I think I like Jonathan Brooks more anyway. But Jerome Ford currently going in the 10th round. My thing about Jerome Ford is he finished last year as running back 16 once Nick Chubb went down. He had 11 finishes in the top 24, so he's basically a guaranteed RB2. A lot of people are wondering, what is Nick Chubb going to do this season? I don't trust Nick Chubb at all. I really don't believe he's going to come back and be what he used to be. And even if he comes back at 75% of what he used to be, I think Jerome Ford's going to play a part in that offense. They're going to be a very run-heavy team with Deshaun Watson having to throw the ball. I think Jerome Ford proved his spot in the NFL last season, finishing as running back 16 in fantasy and had over 250 total opportunities between rushing and receiving. I think Jerome Ford's going to be a really good player. He can score touchdowns. He's a great receiving back, and he rushed for over 900 yards. I think if you're looking at Jerome Ford in the 10th round, 11th round, and you're looking at running back 3, running back 4 territory, go ahead and take a shot on him, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised once the season gets underway.
Yeah, my favorite spot to draft Jerome Ford in is when you have an early bye week with your starter. And that's just because no matter if Nick Chubb comes back and alphas Jerome Ford out of the job, he won't be back by the time your bye week comes around.
Yeah, I mean, Jerome Ford is in a situation where the starting running back is 28 years old, coming off a torn ACL, MCL, and meniscus. So I know it's Nick Chubb, and I know, at Georgia, he did the same thing where he tore his knee up and then came back the next year and was just as good. But efficiency-wise, he dropped off, and I think there's a big difference in a 21-year-old tearing up his knee and a 28-year-old tearing up his knee. I just trust Jerome Ford to finish a lot higher than people are taking him in his running back 30. Like, he's going in the 30s or 40s at the running back position. So although he's not technically my deep sleeper, it's a guy I want to look out for.
Yeah, I mean the Cleveland backfield's one that I'm kind of sticking away from totally, unless I can get a crazy value at like the last round. I'm worried about Nick Chubb coming back and taking some opportunities away. Then that makes Jerome Ford less valuable. And then the coaches, as much as none of us really believe in him, but the coaches talk about Donta Foreman, and they gave him money to join the team. It's too crowded for me to really stake my claim for any of them.
Yeah, and that's a fair point too, and that part of that is why he's not on my deep sleeper list. Do you guys have anybody who we haven't talked about that you think people should keep an eye on?
I've got if ReBo doesn't have anyone, there's like a trio of rookie receivers that I'll just briefly mention all 3 of them. It's Roman Wilson out of Pittsburgh, Jalen McMillan for the Buccaneers, and then Jalen Polk for the New England Patriots. They all have their concerns, but I think they're 3 very talented players that if you're drafting right now, you can get in your last round. Like, I've seen all 3 of them there very consistently and in the last round. It's not a problem. But I think by the time training camp rolls around and we see more of these guys on the field through preseason action, then I think their draft stock could shoot up a little bit. Roman Wilson in particular, because I really like him in that Pittsburgh offense.
Yeah, Jalen Polk could end up being the wide receiver 2 for New England, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. Roman Wilson, as it stands right now, is pretty much guaranteed that wide receiver 2 spot in Pittsburgh. And then Jalen McMillan is battling for that wide receiver 3 spot in Tampa. And then one more guy, rookie wide receiver that you love, and I can't believe you didn't mention him, is Ricky Pearsall. Depending on what happens. Depending on what happens with Brandon Ayuk, Ricky Pearsall could be a very good late value.
I really loved Ricky Pearsall until the 49ers drafted him. Now I don't really care because I feel like he just doesn't work with that offense. It's way too crowded, and even if one of Debo or Brandon Ayuk get moved before the season kicks off, I still don't know if I really trust Ricky Pearsall in that system.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a valid point, but you kind of have to throw him in there just because he was a first-round pick, and teams don't spend first-round picks on guys they don't have plans for.
And I'll continue to beat the dead horse and say that Roman Wilson is my favorite out of those 4 guys, just because we mocked, if you watched our mock draft videos, we mocked Brian Thomas going to the Steelers over and over again just because they have nobody else in the room other than George Pickens. And Roman Wilson, great route runner, was pretty much the only electric player for Michigan last year, in my opinion. And for him to come into the league and already kind of be sitting at wide receiver 2 in his offense, and that offense having quarterback battle after quarterback battle, they've got everybody on that team has something to prove, and I think Roman Wilson will benefit from that the most.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of cool rookies to look out for. Stay tuned for fantasy football content coming to you next week as well, where we'll do our first OTD mock draft.
Let's go.
So this episode, we covered my guys in the beginning, guys who we are standing pat on as our favorite players to draft, and especially where they're being drafted. We really want them on our squads. You just saw our deep sleepers, guys who are going to the double-digit rounds, who we think can make a difference for your team, whether it be early in the middle of the season or push it at the end to win you the playoffs and the championship in fantasy football. If you like this content, make sure to follow us on X, _Dome Pod. Like, comment, and subscribe here on YouTube, Off the Dome Sports Podcast. We're gaining subscribers every day, gaining followers every day, and we really appreciate everyone who watches the content. Without any further ado, we'll see you next week. I'm Redfish.
Lionel Frankenstein.
And I'm ReBo Hustle.
And we will see you next time.